The marble lobby gleamed under cold fluorescent lights, empty except for one man waiting for an elevator that refused to come. Brett Lawson checked his watch, 10:43 p.m. on a Wednesday, when small footsteps echoed behind him. A girl, maybe 8 years old, stood near the revolving door, her backpack sliding off one shoulder, her breath coming in short bursts. She stared at him with eyes that had seen something no child should see. "Mister," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the hum of the building's ventilation. "May I stay here? Someone's following me." Brett opened his mouth to offer the usual adult reassurance, imagination, shadows, nothing to worry about, when his gaze drifted past her toward the glass entrance. A figure stood motionless on the sidewalk outside, backlit by the street lamp, watching. The shadow pressed one hand against the glass door, fingers splayed wide like a dark star. Brett's throat went dry. This wasn't imagination. And if this little girl could see what adults refused to see, what else had been happening right under their noses? Brett had stayed late again, the kind of late that turned work into refuge. His daughter Iris was spending the week with her grandmother upstate, and the silence in his penthouse apartment had become unbearable. So he lingered in the 40th floor office, reviewing contracts that didn't need reviewing, answering emails that could wait. The building emptied around him in waves until only the hum of ventilation systems remained. The elevator had stopped working around 10:30, leaving him stranded on the ground floor, jabbing the call button with increasing irritation. When he heard the footsteps, light and quick on polished marble, he turned expecting a security guard. Instead, the girl appeared as if she'd materialized from shadows rather than walked through doors. Her jacket was zipped to her chin despite the mild October evening. Her backpack, decorated with cartoon astronauts, seemed too heavy for her small frame. But what struck Brett most was her face, not panicked, not crying, but carefully blank in the way children learn when showing emotion becomes dangerous. She studied him with uncomfortable intensity, as if calculating odds he couldn't see, weighing risks in a mind too young to understand such things. "Are you okay?" Brett asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. The girl didn't move closer, didn't relax her white-knuckled grip on her backpack straps. "My name's Brett." "Do you need help?" She glanced over her shoulder at the glass doors, then back at him with those two old eyes. "I walked past this building 3 times, she said finally, her voice steady and practiced. "I saw the lights on. I thought maybe someone here could help." The careful phrasing, the rehearsed quality, it reminded Brett of Iris when she was trying to explain something important without crying. Brett crouched to her eye level, the way he'd learned when Iris was small and frightened. "What's your name?" Zoe Patterson." Brett smiled, trying to project the calm reassurance of a father who'd soothed countless nighttime fears. "Okay, Zoe, tell me what's wrong. Did you get separated from your mom or dad?" The girl shook her head slowly, and Brett noticed how her gaze kept darting to the windows, scanning the darkness beyond the glass. "My mom's working late. Night shift nurse. I walk home from my friend's house. It's only 4 blocks. Mom says I'm old enough." Brett couldn't keep the disapproval from his voice. 4 blocks alone at this hour? Zoe's chin lifted defensively. "I'm not a baby. I know the route. I know which stores stay open. I know when to cross the street." She stopped abruptly, and Brett saw something flicker across her face. Not defiance now, but genuine fear breaking through the careful composure. "I know when someone's following me," she said quietly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And someone is." The words hit Brett like cold water. This wasn't the breathless drama of a child seeking attention or the vague fears of an overactive imagination. This was controlled terror, the kind that came from real experience. "What makes you think someone's following you?" Brett asked, keeping his tone neutral, not quite believing, but not quite dismissing either. He thought of Iris, of the time last month when she'd tried to tell him about a man offering candy outside her dance class. He'd been in the middle of a conference call, distracted, and had waved her off with the usual warnings about strangers. Never asked what the man looked like. Never asked if she'd seen him more than once. Never really listened. That memory made him pause now. Made him give Zoe the attention he should have given his own daughter. Zoe took a shaky breath, and the words came out in a rush. Too detailed, too specific to be invention. He's been there for 3 days now. Tuesday, Wednesday, today. Same man. He wears a dark baseball cap pulled low so you can't see his face. Dark jacket, jeans. He never gets close, just follows about half a block behind. When I speed up, he speeds up. When I cross the street, he crosses too, but later, like he doesn't want me to notice the pattern. She recited the details with clinical accuracy, and Brett felt ice slide down his spine. Children who made up stories were vague, adding fantastical elements. This was observation, pattern recognition. "Did you tell your mom?" Brett asked gently. Zoe's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, real emotion cracked through her careful composure. "I tried. Tuesday night, when I got home. She said I was watching too much TV. She said—" The girl's voice broke slightly. "She said I was being dramatic. That I wanted attention because she's been working doubles all week." Brett winced, recognizing himself in that dismissal. How many times had he done the same to Iris? Too busy, too certain that adult perspective trumped childish concerns, too ready to offer platitudes instead of real attention. "I believe you," Brett said, and he meant it with sudden, fierce certainty. Zoe's eyes widened, and he saw the desperate gratitude there, the relief of finally being taken seriously. "I believe something scared you, and we're going to figure this out together." He stood, scanning the empty lobby. The security desk sat unmanned, the guard on his rounds. The elevators remained stubbornly broken. Outside, the street appeared quiet, almost too quiet for a Wednesday night in the city. "First thing," Brett said, pulling out his phone. "Let's call your mom and let her know you're safe." Zoe recited the number from memory, and Brett dialed. It went straight to voicemail, the generic automated message with no personal greeting. "She turns her phone off during her shift," Zoe explained. "Hospital policy." Brett left a brief message, keeping his voice calm and professional, not wanting to alarm an already stressed mother. He knew that exhaustion intimately, the bone-deep weariness of single parenting, of trying to be enough for a child when you felt like you were constantly falling short. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Brett Lawson. I'm at the Meridian building on Harrison Street. Your daughter Zoe is with me. She's safe and unharmed. Please call me back at this number as soon as you can." "All right," Brett said, turning back to Zoe. "While we wait, I want you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Start from when you left your friend's house." Zoe nodded, and some of the tension left her shoulders now that an adult was finally, truly listening. "I left Kendra's at 9:30. She lives on Maple Street, 4 blocks from my apartment. I know the way. Mom's made me walk it with her 100 times. Left on Maple, right on Oak, straight down to Harrison, then left on Harrison to my building." Her hands twisted the backpack straps as she spoke, a nervous habit that reminded Brett painfully of Iris. "When did you notice the man?" Brett prompted gently. Zoe bit her lip, thinking. "Right away. When I came out of Kendra's building, he was standing across the street under the awning of that closed bookstore. I saw him, but I didn't think anything at first. People stand outside, right? But when I turned onto Oak Street and looked back, he was behind me. Not close, maybe half a block, but definitely following." She paused, and Brett saw her gathering courage to continue. "On Harrison Street, there's a corner store that stays open late. I went inside and pretended to look at magazines. He walked past the store. I could see him through the window. He didn't stop, didn't even slow down. So I thought maybe I was wrong. But, Brett asked, though he already knew there was more. Zoe's voice dropped even lower. But when I came out 5 minutes later, he was back, across the street again, standing near the bus stop. Not waiting for a bus, just standing. And that's when I got really scared, because it was exactly the same thing he did Tuesday and Wednesday. The exact same pattern. Follow me, walk past when I go inside somewhere, wait for me to come out. She looked up at Brett with those two knowing eyes. Like he's testing me, seeing how aware I am, seeing if I'll notice. The calculation in that observation, the understanding of predatory behavior from an 8-year-old girl, chilled Brett more than anything else. This wasn't fear of the dark or of strangers in general. This was the recognition of a deliberate pattern, the kind of awareness that came from genuine threat. So, instead of going home, "You came here," Brett said. Zoe nodded. I couldn't go home. He'd know where I lived then. I couldn't go back to Kendra's. I'd be leading him there. So I just walked. I walked until I saw this building with lights still on up high, and I thought maybe someone was working late. Maybe someone would help. Brett felt something shift in his chest. A protective instinct mixing with guilt and admiration for this small girl's courage and quick thinking. "You did exactly the right thing," he said firmly. "You were smart to go somewhere public, somewhere with lights and people. You were smart to trust your instincts." Zoe's shoulders relaxed another fraction, and Brett saw how desperately she'd needed to hear those words. How long had she been carrying this fear alone, dismissed by the one person who should have believed her most? "Mom says I have good instincts," Zoe said quietly. She just didn't believe me this time. Brett knew that hurt, the particular wound of being doubted by the person whose belief matters most. And he knew it from the other side, too, the guilt of being the parent who hadn't listened. "Sometimes adults make mistakes," he said gently. "Your mom is probably exhausted and worried about so many things that she missed how serious this was. But that doesn't mean you were wrong. That means she was wrong, and I'm going to make sure she knows that." The words felt inadequate, but Zoe nodded, accepting them. They stood together in the lobby, fluorescent lights humming overhead, Brett keeping his body angled between Zoe and the entrance in an unconscious protective stance. "Come on," Brett said, making a decision. "Let's go to the security desk. There are cameras. We can look at the footage, see if your follower shows up on any of them." Zoe's eyes brightened with hope and something else, vindication. Finally, someone was taking her seriously enough to look for evidence. They walked across the lobby together, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Brett kept one hand on his phone, ready to dial 911 if needed. The security desk sat in an alcove near the building's side entrance, surrounded by banks of monitors, showing camera feeds from throughout the property and the surrounding streets. Brett had just rounded the desk, was reaching for the controls to pull up footage, when Zoe stopped abruptly. "There," she breathed, and her finger pointed not at the monitors, but at the glass front doors they'd just walked away from. Brett turned, and his heart kicked hard against his ribs. A man stood on the sidewalk outside, perfectly framed by the entrance. Dark jacket, dark jeans, and yes, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. The streetlight behind him created a halo effect that rendered his features invisible, but made his silhouette stark and unmistakable. He wasn't moving toward the building, wasn't moving away, just standing with unnatural stillness, watching. "Is that him?" Brett asked, though the answer was written in the rigid terror of Zoe's posture. She nodded wordlessly, and Brett felt his professional calm crack. The man made no move to approach, no move to leave. He simply stood there in a way that felt deeply wrong. People on city streets moved with purpose, walking somewhere, waiting for something, checking phones. This man did none of those things. He stood with the patience of a predator at a watering hole, certain that eventually the prey would have to emerge. The casual confidence of it, the boldness of standing in plain view, made Brett's skin crawl. "Stay behind me," Brett said, his voice sharper than intended. His fingers shook slightly as he dialed 911, and he forced himself to take a breath to speak calmly when the operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? "I'm at the Meridian building on Harrison Street," Brett said, keeping his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "There's a man outside who's been stalking a child for 3 days. She's with me now. She's safe inside, but he's standing outside the building right now. I need police here immediately." The operator's tone sharpened with focus. "Is the child in immediate danger?" "No, she's inside with me, but this man has been following her. She's 8 years old." The operator asked for descriptions, locations, details, and Brett provided everything while keeping his eyes on the figure outside. The man still hadn't moved, hadn't shown any sign of awareness that police were being called. Or perhaps he simply didn't care. Perhaps he was confident enough in his methods, his invisibility, his ability to operate in the gaps of adult attention. "Units are being dispatched now," the operator said. "Stay inside the building. Don't approach the individual. Are you the child's parent?" "No, I'm just someone. She asked for help. I'm trying to reach her mother now." As Brett spoke, Zoe tugged on his sleeve with trembling fingers. "He's moving," she whispered, and Brett's gaze snapped back to the entrance. The man had taken a step closer to the glass, then another. Slow, deliberate, each movement calculated for maximum psychological impact. His hand lifted, and Brett watched with sick fascination as he pressed it against the glass door. The fingers spread wide against the transparent surface, splayed like a dark star against the fluorescent-lit lobby beyond. The gesture felt like a message, a silent communication that sent revulsion crawling up Brett's spine. "I see you. I know you're there. This changes nothing." The man's head tilted slightly, and though Brett couldn't make out his face beneath the cap's shadow, he felt the weight of that hidden gaze, measuring, memorizing, taking note of the man who'd interfered, of the building that had provided sanctuary. Then, just as suddenly, the man pulled his hand away. He turned with unhurried grace and walked into the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach. His figure dissolved into shadow, as if he'd never been there at all, as if he were nothing more than the nightmare Zoe's mother had dismissed him as. But Brett felt Zoe sag against him in relief. And his own relief was tempered by cold dread. The man hadn't run, hadn't hurried, had simply walked away with the calm confidence of someone who knew this was a setback, not an ending. Brett pulled Zoe close, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat, the trembling she'd been holding at bay through sheer force of will. "He's gone," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "For now," Brett agreed grimly, not willing to lie to her, not willing to offer false comfort when she'd proven herself more perceptive than most adults. "But we got a good look at him, and so did those cameras." He gestured to the security monitors, where he could already see the recorded footage. "When the police get here, we'll have evidence, real evidence that no one can dismiss." The police arrived 6 minutes later, 6 minutes that felt like hours. 2 patrol officers entered the lobby, a younger woman with kind eyes and an older man with gray at his temples. Brett met them halfway across the lobby, Zoe staying close to his side like a shadow. The female officer crouched immediately to Zoe's level, and Brett saw the girl assess her with that same calculating wariness. "Hey there," the officer said gently. "I'm Officer Chen. You did a really brave thing tonight, asking for help. Can you tell me what happened?" As Zoe recounted her story for what must have been the 3rd or 4th time that night, Brett watched her carefully. She didn't embellish, didn't add dramatic flourishes or inconsistent details. She simply stated facts. The route she'd walked, the man's appearance, 3 days of following, the way he'd stood outside just minutes ago. Officer Chen's partner, whose nameplate read Martinez, took notes with increasing concern. When Zoe finished, Martinez looked at Brett with an expression that made his stomach drop. "This matches a pattern we've been seeing," Martinez said quietly, pitching his voice for Brett alone. "Reports from 2 other families near Oakwood Elementary. Kids saying they've seen a man watching them, following them home. Most parents thought it was nothing. Kids being paranoid." Brett's stomach turned over. "So you believe her?" It came out more forcefully than intended, laden with all his guilt over initially doubting her, over all the times he hadn't believed Iris. Martinez nodded gravely. "We believe her, and we're going to make sure she gets home safe, and that her mother understands how serious this is." He turned to Chen. "Let's review that security footage." The 4 of them crowded around the monitors, and Brett pulled up the feed from the front entrance camera. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. They watched Zoe approach the building, glancing over her shoulder twice. 30 seconds after she entered, the figure appeared. Dark jacket, baseball cap, exactly as described. The camera captured it all. The man pausing across the street, his posture suggesting surveillance rather than coincidental presence. His approach to the glass doors after nearly 2 minutes of watching. The hand pressed deliberately to the glass, fingers spread wide. The tilt of his head as he stared into the lobby. Officer Chen made a disgusted sound. That's predatory behavior, territorial marking. He's trying to establish dominance. Show her she can't escape him. She looked at Martinez with grim determination. "We need a bolo out immediately. Dark jacket, baseball cap, approximately 6 feet tall, medium build. Last seen heading west on Harrison." Martinez was already on his radio, relaying information with practiced efficiency. Brett felt his phone vibrate and saw an unknown number. "This is Karen Patterson," a woman's voice said, tight with barely controlled panic. "I got a message that my daughter is with you. What's going on?" Brett quickly explained. His name, the situation, the police presence, the man who'd been following Zoe. He heard Karen's breathing accelerate, heard the moment when maternal concern shifted into maternal terror. "Oh my God, she was telling the truth. I told her she was being dramatic. Oh my God, what kind of mother?" "Mrs. Patterson," Brett interrupted firmly, recognizing the spiral of guilt and self-recrimination because he'd felt it himself. "Zoe is safe. She's right here with me and 2 police officers. She's unharmed. But we need you to come here as soon as you can. The police want to talk to you about what happened and about keeping Zoe safe." There was a muffled sound that might have been a sob. "I can't leave my shift for another hour. I'm the only RN on the floor tonight. Can you, please, can you stay with her until I get there?" Brett looked down at Zoe's upturned face, at the trust and fear and desperate hope written there. "Of course. We'll be right here." The hour that followed felt suspended in amber, stretched thin with waiting, but heavy with significance. Officer Martinez left to patrol the surrounding blocks, looking for any sign of the man in the baseball cap. Officer Chen stayed, asking Zoe gentle questions, building a detailed report. Brett found himself studying Zoe when she wasn't looking, seeing echoes of Iris in the curve of her cheek, the way she bit her lip when thinking. Every child was someone's daughter, someone's most precious thing. How many of them walked around carrying fears they couldn't articulate, seeing dangers that adults refused to acknowledge? Brett pulled out his phone and looked at his text conversation with Iris. Her last message, sent that morning. "Grandma's making pancakes. Miss you, Dad?" He'd responded with a heart emoji, nothing more, distracted by morning meetings and urgent emails. Now he typed carefully, "Miss you too, sweetheart. When you get home, I want to hear all about your week." and I want to talk about anything that's been worrying you, anything at all. I promise to really listen." He stared at the message for a long moment before sending it. It felt inadequate, but it was a start, an acknowledgement of all the times he hadn't listened, all the fears he'd dismissed. Karen Patterson burst through the lobby doors at 11:47 p.m., still in her nurse's scrubs, her hair escaping from a hasty ponytail. Her eyes found Zoe immediately, and she crossed the space at a near run, dropping to her knees and gathering her daughter into her arms. Zoe woke from a light doze with a start, confused for a heartbeat, then melted into her mother's embrace with a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep and frightened. "I'm sorry," Karen kept saying, rocking her daughter back and forth. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have believed you. I should have listened." Officer Chen gave them a moment before approaching with quiet professionalism. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to talk to you about what's been happening." Karen looked up, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing her when I didn't." She turned to Brett, who had stepped back to give them space. "And you. I don't even know you, but you kept my daughter safe when I—" Her voice broke, and Brett shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just listen to her from now on. That's all she needs." The words came out harsher than intended, but Karen nodded, accepting the rebuke she deserved. Officer Chen laid out the situation with professional clarity. The stalking pattern, the security footage, the bolo that had gone out, the reports from other families. "We're treating this as a serious threat. I'm recommending that Zoe not walk alone anywhere until this individual is apprehended. A detective will follow up tomorrow." Karen's hand tightened on Zoe's shoulder. "She won't be alone. I'll rearrange my schedule, call in every favor I have. She won't be alone again." Chen nodded approvingly and provided resources, victim services, counseling contacts, safety protocols. She pulled out a card with Brett's handwriting. "Mr. Lawson gave his contact information. If you need anything, a safe place, someone to call, you can reach him." Brett hadn't exactly offered that, but he didn't contradict Chen. Looking at Zoe clinging to her mother, he knew he couldn't just walk away, couldn't return to his empty apartment and pretend he hadn't seen a child's terror become real. "I mean it," he said, meeting Karen's eyes. "Call if you need anything." Karen's eyes filled with fresh tears. "How do I even begin to thank you?" "You don't," Brett said simply. "Just keep her safe. And believe her when she tells you something's wrong. That's all any of them need, to be believed." Officer Chen drove Karen and Zoe home, following them in the patrol car to sweep their building and surrounding area. Brett stayed in the lobby long after they'd gone, sitting in the chair Zoe had occupied, thinking about belief and fear and all the invisible dangers children navigated. When the elevator repair crew finally arrived just after midnight, he rode up to his office, gathered his things, and went home. The apartment was as empty as he'd left it, but the silence felt different now, urgent with all the things left unsaid. All the moments of inattention that could accumulate into tragedy. He called his ex-wife despite the late hour. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice muzzy with sleep. "Brett? It's nearly 1 a.m. Is Iris okay?" "Is she?" Brett asked, and proceeded to tell her about Zoe, about how close it had all come to ending differently. "I need to really talk to Iris tomorrow, about safety, about trusting her instincts, about how I'll always believe her from now on." There was a long pause. "She tried to tell you about that man at her dance class, the one offering candy." Brett's throat tightened. "I know. I talked to her when she got here, really talked to her. Brett, she'd seen him 4 times in 2 weeks. Every time she tried to tell you, you were distracted." "I know," Brett repeated, the words like broken glass. "We need to do better. Kids see things we miss because we're not looking, and when they tell us, We dismiss them because it's easier than being scared, easier than acknowledging we can't protect them from everything. His ex-wife made a soft sound of agreement. Tomorrow. Talk to her tomorrow. Really listen. I will, Brett promised, and this time he meant it with every fiber of his being. Brett couldn't sleep. At 9 a.m., already dressed and caffeinated, he called Karen Patterson. She answered immediately. How is she? Scared, but okay. The detective came by this morning. Brett. They think he's been watching kids at 3 different schools. Zoe wasn't the only one. The coffee in Brett's stomach turned sour. But she was the one who got help. She was brave enough to break the pattern, to keep asking until someone listened. Because you listened, Karen said. The detective wants to know if you'd review more security footage with her, help identify any other times he might have been in the area. Of course, Brett said immediately. Whatever you need. They arranged a time, and Brett hung up, feeling purpose settle over him like armor. This wasn't over. The man was still out there. But now people were looking. Now people believed. At 10 a.m., Brett picked up Iris from her grandmother's house. She ran to him with her usual enthusiasm, chattering about pancakes and a squirrel and a movie Grandma had let her stay up late watching. Brett hugged her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her safe in his arms. Bug, he said, using his nickname for her. I need to talk to you about something important. They sat in his car in the driveway, and Brett told her about Zoe. Not all the details, nothing to give her nightmares, but enough. Enough for her to understand he was sorry for not listening better. Enough for her to know he believed her now. The man at dance class, Iris said quietly, with the candy. Tell me about him, Brett said, and this time he put his phone face down, turned off the radio, gave her his complete attention. Iris described a balding man in his 50s, with a kind smile that didn't reach his eyes. He'd appeared outside the studio 4 times with pockets full of wrapped candies, offering them to little girls. He knew my name, Dad. He said, Hi, Iris. Your dancing is so pretty. Brett's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Did he ever touch you? No. I always said no thank you like you told me. But he was there every week, and nobody did anything. Brett pulled out his phone immediately. I'm doing something now. He called the dance studio, described the man, demanded better security measures. The manager sputtered excuses. They'd told him to leave once. They didn't think he was a real threat. My daughter is never coming back until you have proper security and take every single report seriously. I'm reporting this to the police right now. He hung up and looked at Iris, at her wide eyes watching him with something like wonder. I'm sorry I didn't listen before. I'm sorry I made you feel like your fear didn't matter. It does matter. You matter more than anything. And from now on, if something scares you, if something feels wrong, I will listen. I will believe you. I will do something about it. Iris threw her arms around his neck, and Brett felt tears burn hot behind his eyes. How many other fathers were having this exact conversation today? How many more still needed to? Detective Rodriguez met Brett that afternoon in the Meridian building, a sharp-eyed woman with the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much. Together they reviewed 3 days of security footage, and the picture that emerged was chilling. The man had been in the area for at least a week, appearing at different times, watching different children. Always the same dark jacket, same baseball cap. Always maintaining distance, never doing anything overtly illegal, just hovering at the edge of safety like a shark, testing the boundaries of a reef. This is someone who knows how to avoid getting caught, Rodriguez said grimly. Someone who understands that most kids won't be believed, most parents won't take it seriously. So what do we do? Brett asked, leaning forward with intensity. Rodriguez met his gaze steadily. We flood the area with patrols. We talk to every child at those 3 schools. see who else has seen him. We get his face on every neighborhood watch board, every parent group. We make it impossible for him to operate in shadows." She paused, studying Brett with appraising eyes. "And we need people like you. People willing to believe kids when they say something's wrong. People willing to take action instead of dismissing it as paranoia." An idea that had been forming since dawn suddenly crystallized into clarity. "I want to do more than that. I want to start something, a program. Safe places where kids can go if they're scared, if they're being followed. Businesses trained to recognize warning signs with protocols for protecting children. No kid should have to wander around looking for someone who'll believe them." Rodriguez's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine respect. "That could make a real difference. If you're serious, I can connect you with child safety advocates, community organizers, people who've been trying to build something like this for years." Brett was serious. Over the following weeks, as the investigation continued and intensified, as the man in the baseball cap was finally identified from footage and caught attempting to approach another child near a different school, Brett poured his energy and resources into building what would become the Safe Harbor Initiative. He partnered with local businesses, training their staff to recognize predatory behavior and establishing clear protocols for children seeking help. The Meridian building became the first official Safe Harbor location, its lobby designated as a sanctuary. Within 3 months, 40 businesses across the city had joined. Within 6 months, the model was being adopted in other cities. The man turned out to be a registered sex offender who'd violated parole and had been hunting in neighborhoods far from his registered address. The evidence collected from security footage, combined with testimony from Zoe and 4 other children who'd finally felt safe enough to speak up, secured a conviction. 20 years minimum. Rodriguez told Brett that without Zoe's courage in seeking help and his willingness to believe and act, the man would likely have successfully abducted a child. That knowledge sat heavy on Brett's shoulders, a reminder of how close they'd all come to a different ending. Zoe became a fixture at the Meridian building, though under happier circumstances now. Karen's schedule had shifted to days, and sometimes she'd bring Zoe to visit Brett, to show her that the place where she'd been so scared had become a place of safety for others. Zoe made a poster for the Safe Harbor program, crayon drawings of children holding hands with adults, with the words, "We believe you," in large block letters at the top. It hung in the lobby, and every time Brett saw it, he thought about belief, about trust, about the invisible weights children carried when adults refused to see the dangers they saw so clearly. Iris and Zoe became friends, the 2 girls bonding over a shared understanding that danger was real, but so was protection, that fear was valid, but so was safety. Brett would watch them sometimes, heads together over homework or art projects, and feel something in his chest both break and heal at the same time. They'd both been so close to becoming statistics, so close to being stories that made parents grip their children tighter and wonder why no one had listened. But they'd survived. They'd been believed. And now they were helping other children survive too. 6 months after that night in the lobby, Brett hosted the first Safe Harbor appreciation event in the Meridian Building's conference center. Children and parents gathered alongside business owners, police officers, and child safety advocates. Zoe stood at the microphone, no longer pale and frightened, but steady and strong. She'd prepared notes but set them aside. "I was really scared," she said simply, her voice carrying clearly. "The person who was supposed to protect me didn't believe me. But then I found someone who did, and that made all the difference." She looked directly at Brett, and he had to swallow hard. "What I want other kids to know is, if someone doesn't believe you, keep asking until someone does. There are people who will listen. There are safe places. And what I want adults to know is, when a kid tells you they're scared, they're probably not making it up. They're telling you because they trust you to help. So please, please believe them. Please help them. Because that's what adults are supposed to do. The applause was thunderous, and when it subsided, Karen Patterson approached the microphone, one arm around her daughter. "I'm Zoe's mom, and I'm the person who didn't believe her," Karen said, her voice cracking. "I want other parents to learn from my mistake. Children are often better observers than we give them credit for. They notice things we miss. They see dangers we've trained ourselves to dismiss. When they come to us frightened, we need to honor that fear, investigate it, take it seriously, because the alternative is unthinkable." She looked out at the crowd. "So listen to your children. Believe your children. Create spaces where they feel safe telling you the truth. That's our most important job." Brett found himself at the microphone next, though he hadn't planned to speak. "I'm not a hero," he said bluntly. "That night, my first instinct was the same as every other adult's, to dismiss what Zoe was saying. What changed was that I saw the evidence. I saw the man at the glass doors. I realized she'd been telling the truth all along." He gripped the podium, remembering the hand pressed to the glass like a dark promise. But children shouldn't have to provide evidence for adults to believe them. We should believe them the first time. We should investigate, take precautions, honor their instincts, because they're often right. His eyes found Iris in the front row. "I have a daughter who tried to tell me about a dangerous situation, and I brushed her off. I was too busy, too distracted, too certain I knew better. Meeting Zoe showed me how close I'd come to failing my own child. None of us are immune to this mistake, but all of us can choose to do better." He gestured to the Safe Harbor logo behind him, a lighthouse with its beam cutting through darkness. This isn't just about physical places. It's about creating a culture where children's voices are valued, where their fears are taken seriously. The real work happens in individual moments, when a child says, "I'm scared," and an adult says, "I believe you." After the event, Zoe and Iris approached Brett together, carrying a folder. Inside were drawings, colorful, hopeful images of safe harbor locations, of children and adults, of lighthouses in darkness. The last drawing showed the Meridian lobby at night. A small figure with a backpack faced a tall figure with kind eyes, and through the glass doors in the background, barely visible, a shadow retreated. "This is the night everything changed," Zoe had written beneath it. "This is the night someone believed me." Brett stared at the drawing, feeling its weight. "I'll keep this forever," he said, his voice rough. The girls hugged him simultaneously, these two survivors who'd turned fear into action. Later, Brett stood alone in the Meridian lobby. The space looked different now, warmer, welcoming, with Safe Harbor logos and comfortable chairs for any child who might need refuge. The security guard, a former teacher named Ruth, who'd been one of the first volunteers, nodded to him. "Good event today, Mr. Lawson." Brett looked at the glass doors, remembering the figure who'd stood there, the moment everything changed. He thought about all the children out there right now, seeing things that frightened them, wondering if anyone would believe. He thought about Zoe's courage, about choosing belief over dismissal. His phone buzzed. Karen Patterson. "Zoe walked home from school today without being scared. Thank you for giving her that gift." Brett smiled, typing back, "Thank you for raising a daughter brave enough to ask for help." But that wasn't quite true. Being there mattered. Believing mattered. Acting mattered. The combination of a child's courage and an adult's willingness to listen had created something powerful, something spreading beyond one building, one city, one night. He thought about the man behind bars now, his hunting days over. He thought about the children who'd never know they'd been saved, who'd grow up safe because one girl refused to be silent. Brett's days looked different now, shaped by purpose instead of emptiness. Iris stayed with him more. and they had a ritual. Every night, he asked her to tell him about her day. Really tell him, including anything that worried or scared her. Each time she shared, each time he listened, he saw her trust deepen, saw her believe more firmly that her voice mattered. That was the real work of Safe Harbor, not just locations or volunteers, but a cultural shift toward believing children, toward honoring their instincts, toward recognizing that they often saw truths adults trained themselves to ignore. The city hummed with nighttime energy outside the glass doors. Somewhere, children were afraid. Somewhere, predators hunted. But somewhere, a child was walking into a Safe Harbor location and being believed. Somewhere, a parent was pausing to really hear what their child was saying. The culture was changing, one conversation at a time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. There would always be more danger. But it was something, a promise that when a child said, "I'm scared," someone would answer, "I believe you." As Brett drove home, he thought about tomorrow and all the days ahead. Iris was growing up, navigating a world of beauty and danger. But she was doing it knowing her father believed her, that safe places existed, that her voice carried weight. Across the city, other children were learning the same. One Safe Harbor conversation at a time. One moment of belief at a time. It was a start. The elevator rose smoothly, carrying Brett toward home and his daughter. When he opened the door, Iris looked up from her homework. "Hi, Dad. I have something to tell you." Brett set down his briefcase, turned off his phone, gave her his complete attention. "I'm listening," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. In that simple exchange, a child speaking, an adult listening, lay the entire architecture of safety, the whole foundation of trust, the complete blueprint for a world where children could grow up protected instead of silenced, believed instead of dismissed, safe instead of scared. Because it all came down to those two words Zoe Patterson had said on a cold October night in the Meridian Building lobby. "Someone's following me," and the response every child deserved to hear, the response Brett Lawson had finally learned to give. "I believe you."